Perhaps the worst kept secret in this year's NFL draft is that the Indianapolis Colts were targeting a quarterback. They needed a quarterback. They wanted a quarterback. And they made no real delusions or allusions to wanting anything else. Like you could say, hey, the most telegraphed thing about this draft was that once the Panthers traded up, the reports were coming out that it was going to be Bryce Young as the pick at number 1. That was pretty telegraphed. Fair enough. But after that, what were you most certain about? You can't even say the Houston Texans taking a quarterback at pick 2 because of all the reports that you saw about Will Anderson in the days leading up to the draft. You're hearing these reports about the Titans might want to trade up to where the Cardinals were at 3, but that was far from a certain thing. But you knew no matter what, the Colts knew the assignment here. They had to come out of this draft in that 4th overall pick with a young quarterback to build a franchise around, period. Now, there were certainly questions about which one they would covet the most, which one they would target, but we knew they had to draft one this year. Jim Irsay knew they had to draft one this year. It was basically, Chris Ballard, you draft a quarterback or you're fucking fired. Chris Ballard knew logically, hey, I can't keep going down the retread crap. The Phillip Rivers, the Carson Wentz's, the Matt Ryans. At some point in time, you got to move on past Andrew Luck and start with a new future. They all knew this. But as interesting as draft night came around and the draft starts going, they just sat there. And that was a really risky strategy because you think about it and you say, well, the Texans were going to trade down with them. That's fair. But, the Cardinals were there at 3 and there were rumors about the Titans. There's that thought of, hey, somebody might jump up in front of you. If that had happened, if Tennessee had jumped from 11 to 3 or somebody else had jumped in front of the Colts to take their quarterback, they would have looked really goddamn foolish. Ironically enough, though, the gamble really paid off, in my opinion, when the Cardinals traded back from 3 to 12 with the Houston Texans. So the Colts could sit there at pick 4 and take their guy. And Chris Ballard kind of being a traits, athleticism, skills type of guy, it's not surprising that Anthony Richard was his coveted guy. Because to me, Anthony Richardson is easily the most intriguing quarterback prospect out of this year's draft class. His physical upside far outranks the other notable prospects. You cannot compare his physical traits and skills to Bryce Young's physical traits and skills and think they're in the same universe. Same with C.J. Stroud, even with Will Levis. I'll call out certainly feels like his bust potential also outranks the other notable quarterback prospects. But if you look at Anthony Richardson, you try to project his game to the NFL and you said you feel that he's Cam Newton. Would you take Cam Newton with the 4th overall pick in this draft as a prospect coming out of Auburn and feel good about it for a decade? You goddamn right you would. Richardson made the most sense for the Colts. You look at the situation that he's coming into under new head coach Shane Steichen. He did some really good work with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. He's going to build an offense around AR-15. He's going to customize this offense around Richardson. I love how this played out for the Colts on day 1. They stayed pat, didn't panic, didn't have to give up anything to get their guy, had their guy fall into their lap, and now they've got the guy with the most upside in this year's draft class as a quarterback. I gave the Colts an A for day 1. I got to give credit where credit is due. I love the way that this played out for them. And I also think that their day 2 went pretty well. When they talk about their second-round pick at 35, they traded back multiple times. They picked up an extra 4th and 5th round pick in the process. And when you look at day 2 and the 2 guys that they did take, you say, these are guys that if things go right can be high-end starters in the league. Julius Brents looks like a high-end primary corner. He looks like a CB1 type of guy with that size, ball skills, athleticism. Yeah, to be able to get him at that point in mid to late round 2 is really, really good. And then you did take Anthony Richardson, number 4. You need to give him some help. Josh Downs gives them an explosive option in the passing game, and you got him in round 3. Not bad. That's how you would like to be able to maneuver day 2. You get 2 future starters and be able to accumulate some additional picks for day 3. I gave the Colts a B for their day 2 performance because I thought it was really, really good. And I can certainly say they had a large volume of picks on day 3. You know, there's a question of quantity versus quality, but when you get to day 3, as much as anything else, you want to be able to have a lot of swings at the plate because eventually you're going to connect with something. I think Blake Freeland has the feet and traits to be a future starting left tackle. Whether or not he's going to be that, we'll see. Adebawore is an athletic freak. He was solid value here at round 4. Now, being a Bears fan, I see plenty of Bears fans, you know, confusing their Chicago loyalties and the Northwestern stuff, and thought Adebawore should be drafted much higher. No, he really shouldn't have. This was honestly about the right range for him. But when you're talking about a guy that's that athletic, even as a tweener, you're talking about 6'2", 285, you find a place to fucking play him in the lineup, period. I think Darius Rush is another long, athletic corner with some starter potential there, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Brents and Rush are their starting corners outside in 2024. I think Daniel Scott can at least contribute on special teams. Will Mallory has tight end 2 potential. I think Evan Hull could be the long-term backup to Jonathan Taylor. And, you know, I look at their last 3 picks as likely practice squad candidates, but for those day 3 picks, I thought they got some pretty good value. And some guys that make sense, some guys that have starter potential too. So I gave them a B for that. That was really solid work. You could clearly see in this year's draft that Chris Ballard, the general manager, who's on the hot seat, I've had on the hot seat, I've had my fair share to criticize him about because he deserves every bit of it. You can see they went heavy on the athletic traits here. This draft is ultimately going to come down to what Anthony Richardson does, doesn't do, and that's all that really matters, and everybody fucking knows it. Julius Brents could be a Hall of Famer. Josh Downs could be a multi-time Pro Bowler. Adebawore could make a couple of Pro Bowls. Blake Freeland could be your 10-year starter at left tackle. And none of that shit matters if Anthony Richardson sucks at the NFL level. It just doesn't. So, at the end of the day, that's what this draft class, the whole grading of it and everything in a few years is going to come down to, is how did Anthony Richardson play? If Anthony Richardson is what I think he could be, which is at minimum a top 10 quarterback in the league, then the Colts are going to be in a really good spot and really glad they took him in a division where they have to face Trevor Lawrence twice a year, C.J. Stroud twice a year, and then whatever the Titans end up deciding to do in the long term with their quarterback position, whether that is Will Levis or it's somebody else that they're targeting for 2024. And in a conference like the AFC, where the quarterback depth only gets better by the year, you have to have that dude. And while it might not feel like it pays off immediately, I think Anthony Richardson and some of his traits or some of his weaknesses as they were seen, this is just a guy that didn't get a lot of snaps. He didn't have a lot of experience. And some of his flaws, I think, were overrated a little bit. Yeah, like, I like what the Colts did here this year. I gave them a B because of their approach on all 3 days. But like I said, ultimately, it comes down to what Anthony Richardson is. If he becomes a stud, then this is the draft that saved Chris Ballard's job for years.